is it part of biblical prophecy that all these things are being brought out into the open, or do you think it is more just people like you and me who are just done? And is it some of the Hollywood elite, and I won't name names, but the ones who have said, okay, Mel Gibson, yeah, you can go crazy. The ones that have said no more.
Yeah.
Is this part of just the way history is supposed to roll out, that eventually these people are supposed to be brought out into the light? Or do you think that as people have literally hit the breaking point and they said no more? And where do we see this going? Yeah. Because I've been hearing about this rollout of truth over the last 4 years. Yeah. Where's it going to go? Are we going to reach a point where we wake up and go, we're surrounded by truth now? Or is that even possible?
Well, we live in a very broken society, a very broken culture. And honestly, the answer to all the deception it is Jesus. Mm-hmm. Now, as believers, we say that, and I know there are people that are watching this that are not believers, but I can tell you this standpoint that I had is to understand it is so broken that the only answer that can reestablish sanity will be Jesus. And, biblically, you were in that time that would point us to be very close to the return of Christ. And there are different theological aspects of that. Absolutely. My belief is that, as it lines up, the Lord coming. And I look forward to that moment. But what we see is the Bible's very clear that in the last days, in those days, that we will see deception ramp up. That's obviously my own translation, but it's going to ramp up, and it does become obvious because the people who walk in truth, who walk in the light, who are followers of Christ, and truthfully, you don't even have to be just a follower of Christ to recognize the deception that's around us now.
Yeah.
We see it every day. But as believers, as we become aware and we walk in the light exposes the darkness. It dispels the darkness.
Yeah.
But the truth is as we're walking in this, we have to be bold enough to confront that deception. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges in people's lives as far as the traditional church. And traditional church maybe not be the right description, but for the believer in today's environment, no matter what generation you come from, this is that time when we have to look at it and say, I have to make a choice and I have to make a stand. Because what deception does in the spiritual sense is convince us that the gray area is a safe place to be.
Yeah.
And the truth is the gray area is the place where the enemy deceives us more and more, because all of a sudden we're looking at things, no, that's okay. Yeah. If I support a candidate who believes in this, well, it's okay. It's just an election. See, my firm belief is that part of the deception is to think that my choices and my actions need to be dictated by my needs. Not accurate. Right. That's a deception. As a believer, my actions and my decisions need to be focused on or come from the foundation of my biblical worldview.
Right.
And when we lose that, that's where the real trouble begins to come.
I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of people who have taken a stand, and it's just no holds bar. They're ready to speak truth over any kind of deception. And I also watch them, but I watch them struggle.
Yeah.
In a huge, huge, huge way. They get very disheartened. So what would you say to somebody who has decided, this is it, I'm all in, I'm not backing down, but on those days when you think there's no point, it's taken over. I mean, I think about this. There's a person in our church actually that I had this wonderful conversation with her. They lived on the West Coast, and they were a huge, huge part of trying to help the homeless community on the West Coast. And you think about, there's nothing more daunting than that right there. But they were out there in the streets talking to people, witnessing to people, trying to share Christ with them. And it was overwhelming. And it was to the point where it started to affect their family, started to affect marriages and relationships. And they finally just went, we're going to have to pull up stakes and try to go somewhere else where we can speak truth, because it's taken over. It's too much. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, I think the problem that they're going to have is what's too much, because the alternative is to succumb, to not stand up. And the reality for all of us is there's a war going on.
Yeah.
And it's a spiritual war that's manifest into the physical, but there's a spiritual battle that is going on right now as we speak. And the challenge for us is to understand that whether we want to engage in that battle doesn't mean the battle doesn't exist. If you want to ignore it, you can. But the reality for every person, whether they're saved or unsaved, whether they're people of faith or not people of faith, is that there's a battle for their soul, whether you acknowledge it or not. And whether or not you engage in it does not negate the fact that there's a battle. So to me, if I've got to fight, if I've got to stand up for what I believe, like if I've got to stand up for biblical morality in my culture, in my area, in my community, why would I think that that is not the calling that God's placed in my life? So if it causes me to be uncomfortable, I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, here's my thought too, for the people that say, oh, I just don't know if I want to go through all of that. Like my dad used to say, suck it up, buttercup. This is the day we live in.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge that every one of us are going to face. If you're a believer and you have not felt the sting of the deception of the culture around us, you're going to.
Yeah.
Because it's coming whether you want to admit it or not. So for me, I look at it and realize when I struggle with that and I go, do that, I think about my grandbabies. I think about my grandbabies who are growing up in this ridiculous world in a broken school system where and I know we don't use this word as often as we used to, where this woke agenda is being forced on our kids.
Yeah.
And all these things, everything's broken. Everything is broken. But here's the hope of that. When you understand there's a lie and you say, okay, I'm not afraid to stand up to the lie. I'm not afraid to stand up and confront the enemy who's out after my family, who wants to destroy my community, that wants to take over my city. Look, we've watched deception rule over states. I mean, we look and see, what does California look like now? I'm not talking about what some network wants to tell you.
What they want you to see.
And that have left there. And you ask them and get real answers, or all of these different issues that we look at, we recognize there's a place where we have to stand up and we have to speak the truth, irregardless of whether it makes us comfortable or not, whether or not the people that we want to call our friends who reject us because of the stance that we take. Well, number one, they're not your friends anyway. And I don't want to be a party to a deception. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the German days, in the German church, it's the same story. Is there was a deception, and slowly and slowly and slowly, the political powers began to infiltrate and push anti-God sentiment into and really a distorted viewpoint, and the church remained silent. And when the church remained silent, before we knew it, well, I say before like I was there, but before they knew it, they had lost control of their nation. And we saw one of the greatest disasters as Adolf Hitler led this horrid, hellish season where millions of Jews lost their lives in the Holocaust. And it was because people refused to stand up and confront deception. Our job as believers is to not be silent, to remember our battle is not with flesh and blood, but with the powers of darkness, principalities, all these things. We recognize, we have to know that our job is to stand up and be counted and to be a voice, if not for yourself and for your family or for your husband or your wife, your children.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't even, and I learned of this just a few weeks ago. Again, we talk about being in the Bible Belt. We used to say that with such pride, like, it can't touch us. We're in the Bible Belt. People come here to,
These other people crazy.
well, yeah. But we spoke about that like it was, it's a real thing, And we also said, it's burst, it's gone. That's changed now. And I realized that I'm just learning about just in local schools here. We have a mutual friend that was taking it upon herself to go and become a librarian in the public school system. She doesn't have kids in school. She just cared that much, because I want to be there and I want to pour into these kids. Yeah. And this is how we do it. We stand up. And what an amazing thing when you don't even have kids there to do that. Well, backing up during the whole day 6, okay, there was an intention. There was a group of people who right here locally decided to get on a bus and they were going to go and they were just going to pray. That's all they were going to do is walk around and pray. That was the intention. That was their focus. They had no intentions of doing anything else. They get there, the chaos starts up and they backed away. They stayed out of it. They never saw any of it. But because that person was there, she was shot down. She was told to never come back to anything local. She was, I don't even know, branded, I guess is the name you want to put on it.
Yeah.
But it's that easy now, and it's right in our back doors.
Yeah.
And so the one thing that we learned, I think, when the whole world stopped 4 years ago, I know I did, in my gut, when it feels off in your gut, in your soul of souls, it's off.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we have to adopt and we have to understand. But how do we, because, I don't know, like you said, I've kind of been called a conspiracy theorist a couple of times. How do we start to trust our own discernment?